Hey guys, welcome to the channel. And this is going to be my first video on the channel. I haven't came up with the name of this channel yet, but by the time this video is uploaded on YouTube, there will be a name for this channel. But in this video, we're going to be talking about what would happen if Donald Trump, which is in all likelihood going to be the Republican nominee, and Joe Biden, in all likelihood, who's going to be the Democratic nominee, what would happen if both candidates get a 269 tie in the Electoral College, and neither one receives a majority. We're going to be talking about which states each of them would win in that scenario, and who would become president and vice president in that situation. So first we're going to talk about the states that Joe Biden is really likely going to win, which is almost certainly going to go in his column, which is almost certainly Trump is not going to win. And that would be the states of Washington, Oregon, California, and like all these northeastern states like DC, which is definitely going to go for Joe Biden, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Vermont. New Hampshire is more of a swing state, so that might go for Trump, but we'll get to that later. New York is also almost certainly going to go for Joe Biden and not Trump. Illinois also, especially in a tie, all those states would go for Joe Biden if there was like a fairly even match between the two. Now let's get to Donald Trump and the Republicans. So we're going to start out here in the West. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, these voted for Trump in pretty heavy margins back in 2016. And then North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District are all going to go for Trump. Oklahoma will also, as will Louisiana, Mississippi, Arizona, not Arizona, Arkansas, sorry. Arizona we're getting to later, but Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Indiana. So Democrats are at 178, Republicans are at 122 right now. The next state I would like to get to is Texas. The thing with Texas is that for a while, for like the past 3 decades, I would say, it's been a fairly safe state for Republicans, but in the last few years, it's been trending more and more Democratic, more and more to the left. And especially in this election seems to be favoring Joe Biden to win the election. I guess a lot of people aren't really happy with the way Trump has been handling the pandemic, and they're looking to Joe Biden as a nice alternative to the status quo. But in the event of a tie, I still think Donald Trump would really likely win Texas. And like in 2016, Texas went to Donald Trump by 8 to 9 percentage points. So if there was a tie, if there was a fair match, Texas would go for Trump. And the same thing with Ohio and Iowa, sorry. Those both also went to Trump by almost 10 percentage points. So they would be really likely to go for Trump in the event of a tie. Now Republicans are at 184, but I forgot Alaska, so that brings them to 187. Alaska will almost certainly go for Trump. And Hawaii for Democrats, I also forgot that earlier. They're at the edge of the map, what can I say? But yeah, Republicans 187, Democrats 182. Now we can get into the slightly less safe states now. Virginia I still think is a pretty safe bet for Democrats. In the past decade or two, it's been steadily trending more and more Democratic, and it'll definitely go for Democrats, especially in a tie. Same thing with Colorado and New Mexico. Those went for Hillary Clinton by several points in 2016. I think for Joe Biden, they would easily go Democratic again. And Nevada only went for Hillary Clinton by a few points, and it's still sort of a swing state, but I would say it definitely has more of a Democratic lean, and especially if there would be a tie, Nevada would be one of the states that would go in Joe Biden's column. So we've talked about some of the slightly less Democratic states. Let's talk about some of the slightly less Republican states. The first one that comes to mind is Georgia. Georgia, I think, has slowly been trending Democratic in the past few years. With Stacey Abrams, she almost became governor of Georgia as a Democrat, but even then, it still leans Republican, even if not by that much. And if there was a tie, Georgia would go in Trump's column, because Georgia leans to the right of the country as a whole, I would say. So that brings Republicans to 203 and Democrats to 215. So based on everything we have left, I would say the next safest state would be North Carolina. Even in 2012, when Obama ran a pretty good campaign, North Carolina still went into Mitt Romney's column, which means that there's a slight trend towards the Republican side. So if there was a tie, North Carolina would be one of the states to go for Trump. So that brings Republicans to 218 and Democrats at 215. The next state we're going to look at is Maine. So for Maine, I think Maine at large leans slightly towards Democrats. So if there's a tie, it would go in the Democrats' column. And for the first congressional district, it leans pretty heavily towards Democrats. Hillary Clinton won it by like a whole 10 percentage points in 2016. So Trump would win it by, not Trump, Joe Biden would win it by like a pretty big margin also. So I would think in all likelihood that would go for Democrats. As you may be able to see now, both candidates, Trump and Biden, have a 218 electoral votes in the Electoral College now. So for both candidates, it's a matter of getting 51, exactly 51 more electoral votes in order to secure a tie. So let's look at what's the most likely way that would happen now, where both candidates receive 51 more votes. The first state we're going to look at now, out of all the remaining ones, is Florida. Now, Florida is pretty much a swing state, especially in the 2020 election, but the thing about Florida is that recently Trump made it is his home state, and in the 2018 midterms, Republicans won all those elections. So I would say that if there would be a tie, Florida would slightly lean to the right and go in Trump's column. So we're going to put that for Trump for now, and that leaves him at 247 votes, meaning he needs 22 more votes to secure a tie. Now we're at all the territories that are going to be pretty even in the 2020 election. So from here on out, it gets a bit tougher. But looking at what we have left, we have these 4 Rust Belt states that 3 out of the 4 Trump won. Arizona, which has been slowly trending Democrat. New Hampshire, which in the last election Trump almost won. And these 2 congressional districts, which lean either way by a few percentage points. I think the best thing to do now is to actually look at the congressional districts. So, I think for both of these congressional districts, they will likely go for Trump. But the first one I'd like to look at is Nebraska. Because this congressional district has historically gone into Republicans' column for most elections. The one exception, I think, was the 2008 election. Obama campaigned especially hard in this district because he was worried about a 269 tie. Kind of like what we're talking about right now. But I would say that would be more likely to go for Republicans, especially if there was a tie. So that gets Republicans to 248, Democrats 218. Now, Maine's 2nd district, the thing about this is that it usually goes for Democrats, but 2016, when Trump was running, he was able to win that district. So it's kind of a toss-up on who would win this in a tie, but I'd say for the current scenario, we'll go have this in Republicans' column. So that brings Republicans at 249, Trump at 249, and Joe Biden at 218. So now what Trump needs to do to win this election is to get 20 more electoral votes. So there's actually multiple ways Trump can do this, because if he gets 20 more electoral votes, he gets 269. So there's actually a few ways he could do this. One way would be to get 20 here, all 20 from Pennsylvania. Besides that, though, he could also do 10 and 10 from Minnesota, Wisconsin, or 16-4 from New Hampshire and Michigan. Now, I think out of all the ones I just listed, Michigan, New Hampshire is the least likely. Why do I say that? I'd say that because New Hampshire in general, I think, leans a bit more Democratic. And even though Trump almost won this in 2016, I still feel like it leans slightly Democratic. So I don't think Trump is likely to win New Hampshire. So that puts Democrats at 222, Republicans at 249. So what this means is that there's 2 ways that Trump could get to 269 now. Either with Pennsylvania or Michigan, Wisconsin. So out of these 2, it's the question of which one is more likely to happen, which is a really tough call, I'm going to be honest. Because all 4 of those Rust Belt states are pretty even. But in the 2020 election that's coming up, I'd say like in the actual election, those states might lean Democratic now because of what's been going on. But we're not talking about what's actually going to happen in all likelihood. We're talking about what would happen in a tie. So the question is, which is more likely to be Democratic or Republican? Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania? Now, I think Minnesota is more likely than not going to be Democratic. So if that's Democratic, then Wisconsin would have to be Democratic also to have a tie. Which, logically speaking, that would mean Trump wins Pennsylvania, and that gets him to 269. And then Joe Biden wins Michigan and Arizona. So, out of all the scenarios I just listed, this would be the, by far, most likely outcome where there's a 269 tie in the Electoral College.